All right. Hello, buddies. Welcome to another episode of Golden Graphics. You're watching Wendy with Maddie. I'm Maddie Dawson, and this is episode number 2. In the previous episode of Golden Graphics, I started with year 1, but today I have another favorite comics that I read recently, and it's one of the all-time best, great, one of the greatest ever graphic novel ever made. And as you can see in the cover, it is listed in Times Magazine's 100 Best Novel. So it's a great story, first of all, and then on top of it, it's a graphical novel. So the sketches are stunning. So before I talk, so the name of the novel is Watchmen. And before we jump into the actual segment where we discuss about the story, characters, and stuff, we will have a detour and we'll take a look at the graphic book. I have the graphic book here, so this is my collection, and I made sure, you know, it's pretty neat and clean. I have read it. It's almost like 400 pages, and as you can see, it's a very long book, not like a normal book, so it's like a textbook. And cover is pretty simple with the title in vertical column, and there's nothing in the cover. Literally a red spot and a black spot. That's all you have. So you kind of look at it. It's a color graphic novel. So usually graphic novels are, black and white. But in this case, this is both a comic as well as a graphic novel. So there are like 12 volumes. But once the story was completed, so it was an issue, like issue 1, issue 2, issue 3, 12 issues. So once the story was completed in the magazine, they had published it as a book. So this is like the entire graphic novel, 12 volumes, and as you can see, it's amazing. It's pretty long and a hard read, but it's worth. I mean, it's the greatest graphic novel, I would say. I haven't read much, but pretty much. And they have the making of this book at the end, as usual. Typical of all comics. Okay, let's jump into the analysis part. So what is Watchmen? Watchmen is basically a comic and a story about a group of superheroes. But it's not like any other superhero comic or story like that we see in the movies or in comic books, where there is a protagonist and there's a villain for the protagonist, and the goal of the protagonist is to save humanity or people from villains mastermind plan, and destroy the villain. So that is not the case here. Here we have multiple superheroes, and it is rooted on the reality. So let's assume that in India we know about India, right? It's 2024 and still we are developing, and there are certain places which looks like a very good developed country, but still there are places where it is kind of does not give the same look. So imagine in India in 2024 we have superheroes, and they kind of we do not know the identity, but they just live like Batman or so Batman doesn't have superpowers, imagine, right? So even here in the story, these guys do not have superpowers, and they live in the society just with a mask. They have hidden their identity. They just fight against crime. Vigilante, they are just vigilante, private vigilante group, and this is how the story begins. And we come to know that after a period of time, maybe 20-30 years, and the government has got tolerated them, and there is growing tension, like these people are above the law or below the law, or like how they should be treated. And after a point of time, the government has taken action that there should not be no more vigilante. So everybody is under the law. So they are trying to arrest all the superheroes. So certain superheroes voluntarily come out and give the identity, and they say that no, we'll not do such things, or like pursue crime fighting anymore on our own. So that's where the actual story begins. So we kind of switch between the past and present, and we have this is the story. So the story, if you see, if superheroes existed in our realistic society, what kind of problems they'll face, and how will they behave, or what is their motive, why did they put up a mask or put on a mask to fight crime, and what is their backstory, how they became a superhero. And so this is the story, like basically revolving around a certain group of superheroes, or crime fighters who has taken the disguise of superheroes, and what's going on in their life, and the consequences of them in the society. So that's the story. And it's very interesting. If you see, we all know that superheroes like Superman, Batman, it's for thrill, action, and it is oriented towards entertainment. But here it goes dark and deep. As you can see behind me, these are the characters: Nite Owl, Captain Metropolis, Dollar Bill, Manhattan, Comedian, Silk Spectre, Hooded Justice. So many characters you can see. So, and every character is developed. So the main characters are Manhattan and Comedian, Nite Owl, and Rorschach. So I'm not sure, it's not shown here, but when we jump into the graphics, we'll see. Okay, so there are four particular crime fighters from this group, and we kind of perceive the story through these four characters, especially Rorschach. So the story starts with Rorschach. So they just have their own backstories, and there are like 12 chapters. So in every chapter, we kind of take a peek at their character in a very deep level, and most of the characters are very dark, and the whole story itself is set in a world where it's alternative world, right? Like, what if these superheroes existed, and in this world, like Vietnam War, America won. So in reality it was not the case, but in this comic book, the story that they have built, so it's because of this superheroes intervention, the Americans won the Vietnam War. So there are alternate histories as well. And as we were seeing, I'm talking about characters. So there are four main characters through which we see the story as well as perceive the world, and those four characters are really strong and it's fantastic. Like, we kind of feel, I don't know, like you kind of hate at point of time, like the superhero image that you built would crash, and you will feel the reality, like, okay, if superheroes existed, then they are also going to be normal humans, and they will have their own sufferings. So everyone have their graph, as well as their conflicts or catharsis, and the war, internal war that they are fighting. And on top of this, the American-Russian conflict, Cold War, and the nuclear tension. So we didn't know, like, I was born in 90s and it's 2024. We do not know the tension that was going on in the 60s and 70s between Russians and Americans. So it was almost like any day a nuclear bomb could be dropped in America by the Russians. So that kind of tension was going on. So at that point of time, how the citizens were and how these superheroes were responding and reacting. So all these are beautifully built and conveyed through sketches. So that's the important part, and that I will come back to it at the end. So this is about characterization. So there are a lot of characterization. As you can see, it has all the great elements, right? A great story, and many characters, not just one. So it doesn't revolve around one character. There is no concept of protagonist, antagonist. So it's just like a lot of Quentin Tarantino movies. So in Quentin Tarantino movies, we always see characters, right? So here is also same. We have a lot of characters, and they are well developed over the course of these 12 chapters. And yes, so as I was saying, every character is very depth. So it has its dark nature, and they have their own morality. So Rorschach, his background story is like his mother is a prostitute, and he has seen her work when he was a child, and that has affected him. So he has his own morality, and he's kind of like a outcast, and he just wears a mask where and I'll show you, like, it will be like a black spots spread around. So he's very abhorred by all other crime fighters, but he's still part of the group. And then there is Nite Owl, who's taken, basically like Batman is. It's basically, I think they have inspired it by Batman. So Night Owl is basically an owl. He has this owl-sized wings as well. So it's kind of all the characters are based on certain superheroes from DC, and we have female characters as well, and they have also been developed well. And it's so good to read after a point of time with this particular story and these amazing characters, and to perceive it through sketches, right? Comics, color sketches. It was really standing. So, and as I was saying, on top of the story and characterization, they have added this framing. Like each and every frame is a sculpture, I would say. So the story, I would say, one frame is something like any frame you pick from the comics, it's going to be denoting the entire story, and there's symbolism. Like it's actually like a movie reading this comic book. So yeah, we'll just take a look at the comics as I speak. I don't want to talk much about it. I want to show you guys so you can see the cover. As I was saying in the detour that we are taking. So the cover is pretty simple. So I just like, if you see any other comics like Superman or Batman, in the cover you will have this hero and villain, Batman fighting someone else or Superman fighting someone else, or any other Spider-Man comics. So it will be very attractive cover page with the hero and the villain on the cover page. But that is not the case in this story, right? So if you see, it's pretty simple: Watchman and the vertical column, and then here we just have a blood spot and a black spot. So it is very what if we defying the standards or breaking the orthodox. So they just wanted to give a symbolism here itself. Like it's not going to be that dreamy, heartwarming, or happy ending superhero story that you have seen in other movies or read in comics. It's going to be an entirely different story. So that's what this cover page says. So this has all the 12 chapters, and let me go one by one. So if you see, this is a preface. So if you see, Dave Gibbons has given a preface, and he has the authors like Alan Moore and Dave Gibbons. So these are the authors of Watchmen. They have been a comic fanboy. So in their childhood, they've read comics, and they have their own fanboy moments. And I think it has become a great comic book just because it was made by people who were, who admired comics reading when they were in childhood. So that's why that is also one of the reasons, I guess. And yeah, pretty much the story starts. So this is how chapters are divided. So whenever there's a new chapter, they mention the clock as well. They show the clock. So it's like 12 minutes to 12 o'clock. So in chapter 12, it will be 12. And they'll always have a quote. So it's I just want to show you, like, how you should read. So it's pretty much standard orientation, right? Left to right, top to bottom. And this is the first page. But then when you go, how they have blocked it, right? So you read one by one. So this is pretty much close-up shot, and then you see there's blood and there's a journal. So this is nothing but Rorschach's journal. So we read the journal, and zoom out or dolly or whatever you can say. You see that it's drainage and the blood is drained out, and there we have the smiley. So there is a reason for that smiley. And again, zoom out, dolly out, and you keep reading in this way, and you see in this frame we have the complete picture. So there is someone in the window of a multi-story building. It's almost like 50 stories, I guess. So from here, he's looking at that spot here, where somebody has fallen down from the window, fallen out of the window, and they have it's a homicide basically. And I'll tell you who was murdered here. So his blood is being cleaned up in the road, and it's being drained. So the narration starts with Rorschach's journal, and couple of inspectors, they investigate this homicide, and they kind of figure out try to figure out how this combat or this murder happened. And you can see the color sketching, color grading, I would say. So these are the what do you say, simulated. They kind of simulate the event, how it might have happened. So this is the actual event. Like, I mean, this is the actual investigation going on. So it's in a different color, like greenish, you know. But when you see the simulation, it's in a kind of reddish hue. So these are all like they are imagining this is how it could have happened. So this is how he actually was thrown away. He was thrown away by someone, but the inspectors do not have any clue like who had done that. So somebody came into his home and fought with him and threw him out of the window. So he was wearing that smile, so smiley badge. So that's what we saw in the first frame, right? So yeah, so you can see in the first 3 or 5 pages you have the attention of the story and the characters, the world. So there is a murder right from page one. We see that it's a murder. Somebody has been murdered, and a couple of police cops, you know, they are investigating the murder scene, and they're trying to simulate what happened, how it happened, and we also see through them. And this was published in 1986. So in today, a lot of series and movies, they have this switch narrations where present tense is going on, but at the same time they switch to the past tense, how it happened. So this is pretty much standard. I think I was playing Detroit game, so even in Detroit game there was a couple of narration like this. So this is a very peculiar treatment and very innovative and highly outstanding, given the timeline it was published 1986. So yeah, we see that how he has been killed, how he could have been thrown away and murdered, and then we come to Rorschach. This is Rorschach, and we see here like he's with his hat and he has this mask. So this is Rorschach. So after the cops go away, he comes into the apartment, like multi-story building where the murder happened, and he investigates. He carries on his own investigation, how he murdered. So this was Edward Blake who was being murdered. So he was formerly a vigilante, but after the government established a rule that there should be no more vigilante fighting crime on their own, so he started working for the government. So he has been working for the government, and somebody has killed him. So that's why this murder has become very highly, you know, high profile case. So Rorschach, so he's one of the formerly vigilante group, and except him, everybody has stopped fighting crime on their own. But he is very adamant, and as I was saying, every character has their own moral standard. So he kind of still wears the mask, and he kind of tries to fight crime on his own. He never gets, I mean, he never ends up getting arrested. So people still look for him. He's like a wanted crime fighter, you know, because of the government's rule that there should be no vigilante fighting crime on their own. So he's like wanted, but he still manages to get into the murder scene and investigate how he was murdered. And we see immediately we switch to the other two characters. So these are Nite Owl. So this is the previous generation. So first thing that happened was 1940 is when these crime fighters came into picture. Like there was one particular person who started this superhero thing, and he started he was like a former cop. I mean, he was a cop indeed, and he trained and he became a superhero. And after him, a lot of people you know, got admired by his this, nobody know that identity, but because of his superhero identity, everyone got inspired. And over the course of 10 years they became a group. So if you see, this is the costume of Nite Owl. He is the current Nite Owl, but they have given up. So he's just he's become a normal guy now. He doesn't fight crime anymore. So basically this murders kickstart the story, and Rorschach has a notion that somebody is murdering the former superheroes one by one, and he's warning all others. Like he goes to one everyone's residence. Like he goes to Nite Owl's residence and says that, you know, somebody killed Edward Blake, the former crime fighter, and I have a what do you say, conspiracy or notion that, you know, somebody is like wiping out the superheroes, former superheroes, and we should be careful. And at first, not many believe it, the former crime fighters, but eventually they kind of believe him. So this is another crime fighter. So he had revealed his identity. So his name is Ozymandias, Adrian Waite. So he's a very rich, clever, intelligent, and masculine guy is like similar to Superman, but he doesn't have any superpowers. So is very rich. Like Batman is very rich, and he's very strong and muscular. So he has those. He's not having supernatural powers, but he puts on the mask and becomes a superhero fighting crime. So, but then after the government rule is established, he decides to become businessman. So he reveals his identity and he kind of merchandise. So this is his superhero identity. So it's because he's like similar to Iron Man character. So Iron Man is like a businessman, right? So before he became Iron Man, he was businessman. So here, after the government rule is passed, prohibition of these crime fighters, so he becomes a businessman and he ventures into marketing his toys and basically buying stocks. So he gets more rich. So so the only character that actually possesses supernatural powers or superpowers is this guy. He's called Manhattan, Doctor Manhattan, and he became a superhero by accident. So he's basically a what do you say? A scientist who was working in a project which involves nuclear. What do you say? Nuclear power, and his actual name is, let me get it for you, John Osterman. So he happened to be in an accident, and then he gets disintegrated. Everybody thinks for 1 week everybody thinks he's dead, but then he kind of forms himself out of thin air, and he becomes this guy in bluish, what do you see, he doesn't wear any clothes, and he can decrease his size. He can do teleportation, telepathy. So all this telekinesis. So all his superpowers is basically he knows the future, past. So for him, everything is different. Like what we see, like we see the time as linear, right? Past, present, future. But for him, it's very non-linear. He sees everything. So he knows what's gonna happen next moment, but still he doesn't do anything. He just wants to follow the rules set in place. So he has his own moral standards, and when you compare to Rorschach, he's completely different. He knows everything, what's gonna happen, what happened, and he's not having, especially after the nuclear accident, he doesn't age. So he's been living for 40 years in the same form, and because of him, Americans get to win the nuclear war. So he has influenced, he decides to work for government. So he's just working for the government even though he knows what's going to happen. And he's a very important character along with Rorschach. So if you see, Rorschach comes here, talks to him that Edward Blake, the former crime fighter, has been murdered, and I have a conspiracy that somebody is trying to kill all the crime fighters, and I'm warning you. I came to warn you. But he believes that he knows what's happening, but he doesn't give any comment. And this is another superhero. So she's like they live as a couple, Manhattan, and she's Loris. So she's basically if you see Silver, I think, Spectre, Silk Spectre. So that's the older generation female superhero. So she's the daughter of Silver Spectre. So she's called Silver Spectre 2 now in the 1970s, and they live as a couple, John, Mr. Manhattan, and Loris. So he wants both of them. So this is how the story begins, and if you see at the end of every chapter, we have this book format as well. So this particular chapter, just before chapter 1, Under the Hood. So it's a book published by Hollis Mason, the first Nite Owl, how he became Nite Owl. So he's the first crime fighter. He's believed to be the first crime fighter, and what he says, the superhero. It's because of him that all these crime fighters in superhero form came into picture. They just basically wore a mask and they trained themselves. They do not have so except Manhattan, nobody has superpowers in this story. So they just wear mask like Batman. Same in Batman, like he uses technology and his strength to fight crime, right? So similarly, so all the characters except Manhattan does the same. So they use their strength and they put on a mask and they take different names. So in this case, Hollis Mason was a cop and he takes on the form of Nite Owl. So in this particular excerpt, so we get to see how he became Nite Owl. You see, this is the first form he took. He just wore a stupid mask like this. Mask Adventures make the front page. So almost in 1938. So that's the first appearance of hooded vigilante. So In the beginning, they were called the Hooded Vigilante, and that's how the story starts. And every chapter, and if you note, in every chapter the time is actually moving forward. So I realized it only after 2 or 3 chapters, they have a quote, if you see, right? Bob Dylan quote, I guess. Yeah, at midnight, all the agents and superhuman crew go out and round up everyone who knows more than they do. So it's like an inspiration. So the authors are mentioned in the beginning that they were inspired by Bob Dylan's quote, and this keeps recurring in this comic. So every chapter we get to see more about the characters. So this is Silver Spectre one, the mother, and this is daughter. So she was the first generation Silk Spectre, and her character again is very dark, and as well as it's a female protagonist. Like if you see, we switch between past and present. What happened? So one of the crime fighters in their own group, they tried to rape her. Edward Blake tried to rape her, but then at this age, when she's very old, she kind of has a different notion about it. And this was the first ever group, Nite Owl, Ozymandias, and Manhattan. So they kind of, this is Rorschach. So they kind of meet always, try to discuss, and figure out what to do. But it was not working out. Everybody wanted to fight crime on their own, so it was not working out as a group. And the funeral, you can see Edward Blake's funeral happens. Some of the beautiful shots. So I think along with the great story and characterization, it had a brilliant sketching. And if you see, almost all the frames, the colors, and these excerpts, so we see, or we perceive more about the characters through these excerpts. So it's not just comics frames that we are looking at, it is also a story that is written in between chapters. So every chapter at the end we have excerpts that gives more insight into the story. And I love this segment where on the road, just outside this government facility, nuclear facility, where they do research and development, there is a bookshop or a newspaper stand, I guess they would call. So this is an old man who's the owner of the newsstand, and there's a small kid, not kid, teenage adult, like he reads comics. So is if you see, it's like reading within a book, right? So he reads a comic at one point of time. So if you see, we actually start reading the comics in his perspective. So they show that this particular character in sitting near a newsstand. So this is the newsstand, okay, and he's reading a comic. So look at how the zoom in happens. You go through one by one, like, so this, you see far away there's a newsstand and someone is reading, holding a book, and then closer we confirm that someone is actually smoking and reading a book, and there's an old guy, and then we come, so it's like a comic book. So then we have this over the shoulder shot, he's actually reading a comic book, and we see the comic in itself. So it kind of immediately jumps into the book's view, and it's so amazing. This is what I loved about it, because it gives you that what do you call, peeking at what the character is speaking inside the story. So if you see in movies, there'll be a character watching a movie, so sitting inside a theater watching a movie, and when we watch that movie, it's like you're watching a movie inside a movie. So similarly, it gives that feeling that, where you're reading a comic inside a comic, and this was amazing. So they even had an excerpt about this comic's author and how he was famous, and like how he got famous. So it's like absolutely mind blowing when you go into, if you see this. Initially, they give 1 or 2 frames about what's happening inside that comic this character is reading, but there is actually more when you go. So slowly, page by page, chapter by chapter, we get to know more about all the characters, as I was saying: Rorschach, Manhattan, Nite Owl, and then Loris. So all these second generation characters we know. Right? So if you see here, something happens, they kind of. He is a character who knows everything, like past and future, and but he doesn't act to do anything. He says that, there's one quote. I liked it. So he says that, everybody is a puppet in this world, and I am actually a puppet who actually sees the string also. So we are not able to see the strings, but he, because of his superpowers, he's able to see the string, but he still doesn't act or do anything. And this is how the characters are developed. Like frame by frame, we see that what's happening, and what are these characters are made of, how they become. We have a chapter dedicated to Manhattan, how we became Manhattan. So he was John, a scientist, in the 19 I would say 1960s. So at that time a nuclear accident happened and he became this superhero Manhattan. So it's not like he was blessed, it's like a both a blessing and a curse. And we see that backstory as well. And there is what do you say, triangular love. So between Night Owl and Loris, they develop romance at the later end. Before it was John, the Dr. Manhattan, and Loris. But after a period of time, Night Owl and Loris develop romance. So a lot of things are going on. It's not just one genre. And pretty much towards the end, the so yeah, and this is the third excerpt from Under the Hood book, which was written by Hollis Mason inside the character. So this is like an entire world within the novel itself. So you're talking about a book that was written by a character inside this novel, and they have given it as an excerpt. So it's like what do you say, encoded layer of narration within a story. So that's what I liked about it. So every chapter gets you closer to the character as well as the world, that what's gonna happen. So lot of one of yeah. So this chapter 6, we get to know more about Rorschach. So at this point of time, Rorschach gets arrested, and we get to know why or how he became a superhero or a crime fighter, and why is he like this. So everybody thinks he's very dark and he's a mechanic, like he doesn't see good and bad. He has his own good and bad, and this is famous Rorschach spots. So the doctor, so the psychologist is assigned to evaluate him, because everybody thinks he's a psycho. He didn't have anything else to do, so that's why he took up crime fighting, putting on a mask, and his mask is basically filled with black spots. So that's why they wanted to evaluate him, like what do you see when you see these spots. So it's actually this it's pretty famous, Rorschach's spots. And we see that his mother was a prostitute, and it was a very bad memory growing up as a child without dad and a prostitute mother. So that has put him in a difficult spot, and he sees everything. He sees the dirt in the society, and he wants to remove the dirt. So in this perspective, or from his perspective, when we read the comic, we see that. So now and then we kind of switch to his journal's narration, right? So we always see the negative aspects of the society. So here we get, because of this evaluation, we see that his story and his character is getting developed, and you kind of sympathize with him. Like his childhood is messed up, that's why he's become a person like this. And and how he fights crime, and what is his morality, all those things. So it's because, see, this is a file, like basically the report that was filed after he was arrested, and this is at the end of this chapter. So here we come to know like his evaluation, what the evaluation. So it's, we see conflicts exactly like a file report from a police department, and what has affected him, his backstory. And this is Night Owl and Laura is the romance chapter, so they get more intimidating, and they have their own interesting segment. They try to have sex, but it does not go well. But then they decide to go fight crime at the end of the middle of night. And it is actually banned. You cannot go fight crime in your own way, like putting on a mask. And so they do that. They save a group of civilians from a building fire, and so they kind of venture out, and there's a fire in some building. They call out for help, and they get to save these civilians, and after that they get excited and they have sex. So this is pretty funny to read, but it was well developed and sketched as well. This is where things get interesting. So at chapter 8, we see Ozymandias, the main character. I don't want to give any spoilers, but his characterization as similar to Manhattan, Rorschach, Nite Owl, Lawrence, we see his character gets developed as well, like what he does, what kind of business he runs, all those things we see more. And as I was talking about symbolism, I wanted to tell you something. So there is this one particular sketch I would like to show you, where in Antarctica, so yeah, Ozymandias has built his own, uh, what do you say, safe house. They arrive, right. There is brilliant sketching. I realized it after two pages, and then I went back to read it again. So he was basically drinking wine, and he offers to his partners, but he doesn't drink. And I realized this after, where is this, I cannot find it. It's a brilliant sketch, actually. Yeah. Mm, so yeah, this is what I was saying. So if you see here, uh, we see that, so this is in Antarctica. He has created his own, what do you say, uh, basically a small globe inside which he has this ecosystem. So this is inside a globe in Antarctica. So, and he had his partners and scientists. So he offers them like a celebration, like we have achieved this ecosystem in Antarctica, and he offers the wine. And if you look closely, he also holds the wine. And if you see here, others are drinking. So this is the start of the scene, and we see that everybody has a wine, what do you say, glass, and he also has one, but he doesn't drink. Others are drinking the wine, but he doesn't drink. And if you observe, see, everywhere we have this, right? So his glass is full, but all others, they drink. And eventually we see that, see, even here theirs are becoming empty, so that means they are drinking, but he's not yet, he's not even take a sip. Okay. And if you see here this frame, they kind of faint. So it's basically poison. So he kind of poisons his own associates, partners, and make sure that he doesn't drink. That I missed it, so I had to go back and check, like, whether he drank or not on see these frames. So this was I'm talking about, the amount of detail that has gone into these frames. Like, you have to go back to the previous pages, and see what's happening. And yeah, so I don't want to talk about the ending. And the main characters, as I was saying, uh, there are four characters. Rorschach, from whom the story begins. We start reading his journal, right? So this is Rorschach, and the other main character is Hollis. This is Dr. Manhattan. Hollis Mason is the previous generation. Silver Spectre is one of the supporting characters, but Ozymandias is another main character, and Nite Owl. So here I can pinpoint. So Rorschach, Nite Owl, Ozymandias, Manhattan, Silk Spectre 2, Loris. So these are the main characters, around them the story revolves. And they have ensured that all these characters are given proper exposition, so that you kind of associate with them. So all, especially these Ozymandias, Manhattan, and Rorschach, have their own moral point of view, and we kind of see them. So at least one chapter is dedicated to their background story, how they became their crime fighters. They appear now, right? So it's amazing, especially to read it in a paperback. I really enjoyed it. I would say it's a great story, and comic, absolutely. stunning sketches. You see the details, right? The details that has gone into these sketchings, and how the treatment. They decided to not just entirely go with sketches, but also through these different forms of narration, like a crime field report, and then these excerpts from a book and journals. So there is one page where so there is an interview. So this is an interview of Ozymandias by press. So we see that actually the magazine expert, and there is an interview of Civil Spectre one as well. So through Sally Jupiter, yeah, her name is Sally Jupiter, and if you see, we see the news report of this interview, like we actually get to know letters that she received, and his interview with the press. So it's different forms of narration. It's not just through sketches or what do you say, comical. There is comics inside comics, as I was saying. There is particular newsstand. So if you see, he's reading the comic and we start reading the comics. So we see that in this frame there is a character which is reading comic, and the next frame, very next frame, we see what's in the comics, and we start seeing the comics, like what's happening. So this are the comics of, or what do you say, inside this book. And we have a expert of what is this comic, who wrote this comic, who created this comic, what's the story. That's what I loved about. So it has created an entire world within a comic book, and we have so many characters. At one point of time, you start to feel that this is not a story, it's actually happening in your own world. So that's what it makes you, it gives you that impression. I'm sure after 50 or 40 pages you're going to be like, okay, it is something that's happening in reality. It's no more a story or a graphic novel or comics. It's happening in the real world, and these are real characters, and you kind of start feeling that. So it gives you that creepy, eerie feeling. And so a lot of movies, Marvel movies, and other Hollywood movies as well, have taken inspiration. As I said, this is one of the famous narration, right? So if you see Sherlock, I think Sherlock's investigation would mostly be filled with this kind of narrative. So the detective will be investigating the crime scene, and immediately we'll see the flashback or memories of what happened actual in that scene. So this is made in 1986, and a lot of movies have adopted this narration. It's one of the, what do you say, stereotype for investigation scenes. Like if you go into a crime, a cop or anyone who's investigating, if they go into the crime scene and they kind of visualize or imagine what happened, so immediately we see in movies that this is how it happened. So this was sketched in 1986, and yeah, it's one of those book that has inspired a lot of more comic books, the Hollywood industry, movie making standards, and the narrative, especially how do you convey a story. And when you have multiple characters, how do you develop these characters and make sure the readers or the audience who's watching a movie get connected to it or related to it, especially when you are decoding it with symbolism and messages. And it's absolutely brilliant. So how a character should be developed and how a story should be narrated, with all the elements, techniques, everything. So you can give this as an example to write a good story. You can give this as an example to write a, what do you say, good character, and then you can give this as an example to how to make a movie as well. So it's pretty much a storyboard, right? So you can easily figure out this is like a low, I think, ankle level, full view shot, and so maybe the complete rules of cinematography may not be followed, but it's pretty much storyboard template. And there has been a movie made, Zack Snyder, who made Justice League and the DC movies. So Watchmen, there is a movie as well as there is a series. So they say that the series has done reasonably well to keep or adapt this comic book. But I feel reading this comic itself was so good. I was so thrilled, I was like, I looked up. I wanted to read graphic novels, and I looked up in Google like what are some of the basic or best graphic novels. And Watchmen came, so I ordered Watchmen, and I started reading. I wanted to figure out or see for myself what's so great in this book. And I was like, okay, I read the preface. It was good, by Dave Gibbons. He wrote how what inspired him to come up with such a good comic story, and this was like after 30-40 years since it was published. So, and then I read the 1, 2, 3, 4. So when this particular investigation segment got over, I was like completely mind blown. Like, okay, this is simply the greatest comic book. It's amazing, right? So in a normal comic book, as I was saying, we have a superhero like Batman, Superman, Spider-Man, or Iron Man. So they have a supervillain, and they'll try to fight, save humanity from world destruction. So this is what any any movie or any comic story offers you. So we'll have a superhero, and we stand with superhero. So there'll be good versus evil stuff. That is not happening here. So it is both good and evil. We look at both sides and why these people have taken up the crime fighting in their own hands. And so the government has banned. So after that, it's illegal to be a vigilante, especially with masked hood. So especially this character is like wanted by police. Police keep chasing him, so he kind of escapes. He's the only crime fighter who's still in existence after the government's ban. So it's very realistic, rooted on the grounds. You feel they were saying after you start reading, you feel that it's no more a story or a fiction. It is happening in your own world, and you can relate, to so many characters that we see in real life. And we see a lot of news, right? Like somebody tries to kidnap kids or like rape women. So all these, I think in reality we need superheroes like them, Watchmen. So the title is Watchmen, but inside the story, the group, after they formed the group, they are called the Minutemen. So I don't know why that difference was there. So yeah, I absolutely loved reading this, and it's a wonderful story. Long, especially long. It's about, you can see, 400 pages. So I took almost a month to finish it, and it's not just reading. You just can't read the dialogues and then get away with it. You have to look at the picture, like what's happening here. So there will be a lot of information, especially in the beginning of the story. Uh, the frame will have more information to decode. Here somebody comes to assassinate the former superhero. So he's Ozymandias. He's a businessman now. Okay, so if you see this segment, so it starts here, right? So he is getting ready to leave for a meeting. You see Adrian Wheat. V is his symbol. And his secretary is coming and asking, like, you have this meeting, and she's taking him to the meeting. So if you see the dialogues, it's very symbolic. So one page before, they would give you the foreshadowing, and the next page it's coming. So you see, it starts with, I'll just read these for you, like, time's running out, Mr. Wheat, you better hurry. So this is the secretary speaking. And then, yes, I know, it's the toy people I have to see this morning, isn't it? So he's running a business, right? So he makes toys, merchandise of this superhero that he was before. That's right, they want some new characters in their Ozymandias line. Maybe some of your major villains or something. So until now, he's been just making hero toys, but I think they want to have villain toys as well. So that's the meeting that's going to happen. And then he says the major villains are all dead. Oh wow, what is with everybody today? Everybody's on this total death trip. Like on the news this morning, some guy went nuts, killed the kids. You see that? So this is happening even now in America. Like now and then, some student in a school or college, takes a gun and then runs into this group and kills a lot of people. So this was in 1986, and it's like 50 years, almost 50 years, and still it's happening. No, I didn't. So apparently he was scared there was going to be a war. Isn't that dumb? Nobody would be crazy enough to start one. So why everybody is on such a downer about it? So these two characters are talking about death. Okay, so especially this secretary character is kind of having a very what do you say, fearful outlook towards death. Why is everyone talking about death? And it's actually this particular segment starts with the dialogue. You see, I'm sorry, time's running out, Mr. Wheat. So you see next page. as they go walking, somebody is pointing a gun and the bullet is fired, but who ends up dying is the secretary. So you see, the secretary is shot. So I was really stunned, especially this 2 pages I had to read for like 5 minutes to imbibe the actuality, right? The dialogues, the symbolism in dialogues, the foreshadowing in dialogues, and what happened in the next page. So there was a character who talked about death and was not ready to face death, and the next page she ends up dying. So this is the kind of symbolism and foreshadowing that happens throughout this novel, like from page 1 to page 400. So every frame is decoded, I mean encoded with information. You need to decode it, and now and again you need to go back what happened, get to know more about the characters. You missed something about the character in the beginning, and you have to go back and check it out and then come back. So it's very detailed, both in terms of sketching as well as characterization. So there's a lot of detailing that is gone into sketching. So sketching itself is very difficult, and on top of that they have achieved perfect coloring. And you see, it's like watching a movie. I felt like watching a movie. The shift in color tones, especially between flashback and present, and the different characters. So it's so good. I mean, I think you would read at least twice, thrice. It's such kind of story. You would not feel satisfied reading it once. You would definitely read it thrice. And it's like the Breaking Bad of comics, I would say. So most of you would have read. I mean, most of you would have watched Breaking Bad, right? Breaking Bad is the all-time best TV series of all time, like the best crime drama that Hollywood or any industry could offer. It's one of the pinnacle of filmmaking, and the best TV series, 5 seasons, 60 episodes, and every episode is like a sculpture that was sculpted with care and very detailed attention to detail. So I would only say, to put it in layman's term, Watchmen is the Breaking Bad of comics and graphic novels. So, and it's a great story. That's why I think they have what do you say, listed it in the Time Magazine's 100 best novels. It's a great novel, the story and characterization itself. But on top of that, it's a comic graphic novel. So, and that makes it simply awesome. So I hope you guys enjoyed this. I had some more sketching. So yeah, this is Rorschach character, and I was showing this particular panel to you guys. So yeah, you will have to read it once for the story, and you'll have to read it again for the characterization, and then finally read it again for just simply imbibing the graphical sketches and the color shifts and the color tones. So normal reader, if you're interested in reading or comics, you would definitely read it thrice. I've read it once, so I'm gonna read it. Okay, the green screen is removing the cover, so let me show it in my iPhone. Yeah, so I've read it once, and I'm gonna make sure that I read it again twice to fully, what do you say, imbibe the art that has gone into this absolutely wonderful comic book. Amazing. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this episode, and yeah, it's one of my favorites. Batman. I started with Batman Year One, and now Watchmen. So Golden Graphics series, it's a special series dedicated to comics and graphic novels. I will come up with more comics and graphic novels. Do let me know if you want to, if you have read any comics, do let me know if you want to review them. I'll try giving it giving a review about it. And I hope you guys watched, you liked this episode. Do stay tuned for more live stream. You're watching Medley with Manny. I'm Matt Justin. See you in the next live stream. Bye bye.